In recent years, few subjects have had more column inches, multimedia pieces and funding streams devoted to them than the integration of Muslims into British society.
Now, the people here on the panel today are not representatives of the mainstream Muslim community in the West. In fact, some of them may even have an unpopular public persona.
It's not haram for me to sit in a pub as long as I'm not consuming alcohol.
So we should not be surprised that some members of the Muslim community have opted to follow pragmatism over principle and sell out Islam rather than hold out for Islam.
What is the solution for Muslims in the West? The solution is to embrace the culture where we live. Don't alienate ourselves from it.
And I support the British model of procedural secularism that I described earlier.
We've already become westernized. We are products of it. Liberalism, all this stuff that Brother Lowell was mentioning, we're living in.
And what's worse, some Muslims have defected and embraced intellectual colonialization and are helping Western governments spy on the community and in the Muslim world.
So this is how I got involved with Canadian security intelligence. I called them up.
I was operational since 2004.
Just being a good Muslim is enough to make someone a better citizen than the average person who lives in a society based on individualism.
Look at what liberalism has tolerated just here in the UK.
That's bad. We can't tolerate that. Have you seen? He's just proved my point about how tolerant these liberals are. See how tolerant they are, everyone? See how tolerant they are.
Born and raised in Toronto, Canada. Lived a pretty normal life, I think. Lived a pretty normal life. Indian background parents, conservative. At the age of 19, I went with the Tabligh Jamaat, 4 months, India, Pakistan. They sent me to Quetta in Pakistan, and I was going for Jawda by myself, me and the guide. And I chanced upon the Taliban at that time. I thought they were the coolest guys that I had seen, black turbans, guns. And so I say that I was bit by the jihadi bug at that time. Then I returned back in 1995, and I had always been involved with reading a lot of Ahmadiyyat books. I think a lot of us started off on that. And so I was Dawah minded. And as I progressed, actually in 1998, 3 years after India, Pakistan, I actually came to Marble Arch, Speaker's Corner, their Hyde Park Speaker's Corner. I had a real good time there. But it was my first real approach to Dawah, and it was a very confrontational approach. This is something I think a lot of Muslims find themselves in, where we're so excited, enthusiastic about our faith, and we want others to experience it and believe it. But sometimes we get carried away, and so I think I was hostile in that sense, confrontational, trying to beat the other opponent down to expose the flaws in his argument, which somehow magically would prove my own arguments. And so as I just continued on in my life, I eventually got married, and I had started to calm me down a bit. And then I had my first kid, and that continued to calm me down a bit. And 9/11 happened, and that's what really shook me, in the sense that I realized that, whoever did it, or whatever your views are on 9/11, the end result was that Muslims now, we came under, I, like many people, were like, please God, don't let it be Muslims. And when it was said to be Muslims, that, started to make me think, I need to leave the West. The West is a bad place, and I'm out to search for that Muslim utopia that I'm sure is out there somewhere in the Muslim world. So at the same time, I was studying religious studies, biblical studies, in continuation with the Dawah approach. and couldn't go to Saudi because I mean, I have the Jewish Jesus. Those are not books that you can bring into Saudi. So I couldn't go to Egypt because it was too expensive at the time. So Allah saw fit to bring me to Damascus, Syria, in 2002. So I was studying Arabic Islamic Studies. I was in the Salahudeen Takhassus, the degree program there. I only did a year and a half of that because in 2004 I left. And I was doing my religious studies degree by distance, Arabic and Islamic Studies, and teaching English. And I saw a lot of things in Syria which didn't jive with my understanding of what the Muslim world was supposed to be like. I was in Syria, which was a bona fide police state. And really at the end of it, I was struck by the freedoms that we have in the West as Muslims. I mean, I could literally walk outside right now and yell at the top of my lungs and, call the adhan out and do the dawah like some of your nut jobs in some places. They get really wild. But nobody's going to black bag you over your head and disappear you, right? And when I was in Syria, the neighbor, the people that were sponsoring my stay, the brother of the family, he wanted to set up a business, and a competitor person called up the mukhabarat and said, oh, he's Ikhwan Muslimin. Boom, disappeared. 10 years later, they dropped him back to the same spot that they picked him up. So stories like this really affected me, and I thought, wow, we got it real good where we are. That I was like, as I was explaining to the brother, the masjids were closed between the prayers. I thought, how is this possible in a Muslim country? And I mean, at the end of the day, it wasn't really a Muslim country in the sense that we would want to imagine a Muslim country to be. So when I came back in 2004, there was a guy who was arrested on terrorism charges, Mubin Shaikh. He was connected with Operation Crevice in the UK. Well, I went to madrasa with Mubin Shaikh. So this is how I got involved with Canadian security intelligence. I called them up. I said, hey, there must be a mistake. This is the number one reaction that people have when they hear that somebody has done something really wrong. They say, oh, he was the nicest guy. He was so polite. So this is when I got involved with security intelligence. They said to me basically, look, we know that you have a lot of contacts in the community. A lot of, you can get around in all the different groups. Because I had been, experimenting and going around different groups, seeing what they're about, seeing their views. And they said to me, look, you give us advice on who you consider to be a threat, why you consider them to be a threat,
and so on. So I said, yeah, I like this idea. I mean, I like the way that, generally speaking, the West does their domestic national security. There are a lot of flaws, of course. Remember, we're dealing with human systems, so you don't look for perfection. You will be disappointed again and again. So I was operational since 2004. Met a lot of groups, of course, Hizb ut-Tahrir, and who I did not consider a threat in the sense that the Canadians were looking for. So then finally, what they would tell me is, look, we're interested in these people, you tell us what they're about. And they wouldn't tell me the information they already had, because that's to keep me objective. So one day they sent me to a group in late 2005, and they made known their intentions to commit criminal offenses. So I became an undercover agent in that case, and this is a case that was made public because the way that we in the West, they want to prosecute terrorism offenses in public courts. So now people who were formerly undercover agents, now you have to be on a stand in the public. So it became very public, and I went through 5 legal hearings over 4 years. While I was doing the hearings, I completed my degree as a Master of Policing, Intelligence, and Counterterrorism, and that was 2010. And then since then, I trained the military, consult with academics, charitable organizations, just community mobilization, even community groups. And here I am. I was just here at the Counterterrorism Conference at Olympia Stadium. I really loved it. I think there were some really, really good speakers. Like I was telling the brother earlier, don't assume things about people. Even non-Muslims or national security, they must be racist and hate Muslims. Yes, you're going to find racists who hate Muslims. But you will also find people, go with the ayah about among the people of the book. You will find, and the specific context is, those you can entrust with a mountain of gold, and they will give it back to you. But those, if you even give them a little bit, they'll be tight about it. So this applies across the board. So, I found that a lot of them are getting the analysis right, and my job, my philosophy is those who are ignorant and divisive and counterproductive, ignore them, delegitimize them, and those that are good and have good intentions, help them. So here I am today. Thank you for even having me. I really wanted to get in touch with some of the people here, especially this guy who's all the way over there. I'd much rather be sitting beside him and just poking the ribs a bit. But Jazakallah khair for having me, and inshallah we'll have a good chat today.
Okay, thank you very much.
I hope I kept that in 10 minutes.
Yeah, just perfect. Tehmina.
In recent years, few subjects have had more column inches, multimedia pieces and funding streams devoted to them than the integration of Muslims into British society. Whole essays have been devoted to the notion that donning the niqab impedes the exchange of pleasantries in the street. Research has been done on the radicalization potential of university Islamic societies, and online news sites are brimming with details of clashes between groups like the English Defence League and Muslims Against the Crusades. While it should be clear to most people that the views represented on each end of this spectrum are crude and exacerbated by the harshness and unreasonableness of their approach, further coverage should be given to the nuanced positions in between. Television programmes such as BBC One's My Name is Mohammed, which challenged stereotypes of British Muslims when it aired 2 years ago, have done a commendable job of publicising the opinions of British Muslims who feel comfortable with the multiple facets of their identity. Make no mistake, these interviewees displayed a strong moral and spiritual commitment to their faith. But at the same time, they were proud British citizens who demonstrated high levels of engagement with the mainstream democratic process. According to polls, however, second and third generation British Muslims are feeling increasingly alienated. In a poll by market research company GfK NOP, which was commissioned for Channel 4's television special Dispatches, What Muslims Want in 2006, presenter journalist John Snow found that first-generation Muslim immigrants in Britain were keen to integrate, driven by their desire for jobs and prosperity. However, the position of second and third generation British Muslims was more complicated. While they were strongly opposed to terrorism, a substantial number conveyed a sense of separateness in their answers to the survey questions. For example, 1/3 of the 1,000 Muslims polled expressed a preference for living under Islamic law. More recently, the Gallup Coexist Index 2009 found that while 64% of the general British public viewed political participation and volunteering as key markers of integration, these views are shared by only 54% and 24% of British Muslims on each of these issues respectively. An overwhelming amount of literature has attributed these feelings of alienation to UK foreign policy and has recorded scores of international grievances where the British government is seen to be complicit in the mistreatment of Muslims. While it is crucial to highlight the suffering of innocent civilians in any conflict, regardless of their faith, this narrative is overly simplistic. It fails to explain why some British Muslims choose to channel their frustrations through constructive democratic means, such as signing petitions, organising demonstrations, donating money to relevant charities, and undertaking humanitarian work in conflict zones, while others channel their frustration in a divisive, irrational manner. This more discordant approach can be illustrated by the banned group Islam for UK's decision to protest at the Royal Anglian Regiment's homecoming parade through Luton in March 2009. Their members shouted abuse of the soldiers and held placards with offensive messages stating "Anglican soldiers go to hell" and "Butchers of Basra." This led to angry scenes breaking out between Islam for UK's protesters and bystanders at the parade. As Mehdi Hassan expressed in a recent Guardian article on George Galloway's victory in the Bradford West by-election, it is a sad state of affairs when international grievances become the sole driver for political engagement. It is therefore vital for all practitioners who work with Muslim communities to de-emphasize the politics of grievance towards a more constructive narrative that embraces national and local issues. We must lead by example when highlighting the importance of active citizenship, particularly with reference to the values of compassion, integrity, and social justice extolled by Islam. One of the causes of British Muslims' alienation is the fact that many religious leaders are not attuned to the needs of second and third generation Muslims. In many parts of the UK, community elders control the mosques and preach an interpretation of Islam that focuses on faith-based rituals, but don't do enough to equip followers with the skills to become active citizens. Another cause is the proliferation of a discourse that revolves around demonizing the other, rather than focusing on our common humanity and common values. There are many projects and organizations which aim to equip Muslims for civic and political life and to widen access to these arenas. Such projects include youth leadership projects, debating skills training, and educational materials. To this end, BMSD has published an advice booklet for schools which seeks to guide teachers through cultural and religious issues affecting Muslim pupils. Imperative though it is for our children to be raised as well-informed individuals with open minds, it is equally important that they take steps to adapt to their society and their school environment. The essence of multiculturalism involves people living side by side under one shared identity, while proudly holding on to their own so that nobody feels resentful or lack of belonging. The Islam and Citizenship Project is another important development. It provided a citizenship curriculum for madrasas or religious schools across the UK. Through class discussion, role play, and written exercises, children aged between 7 and 14 have learnt through Islamic tradition the importance of tolerance and respect, how to be better neighbours, the importance of volunteering, and how to play an active part in their schools and communities. Taught alongside traditional lessons on the Quran and Hadith, these lessons highlight the compatibility of Islam with wider shared values. The unique selling point to this project is the fact that it imbibes life skills such as peaceful conflict resolution and respect for different beliefs in an environment that is not seen as secular or westernized. This project was crucial in terms of propagating the notion that the British and Muslim aspects of these children's identity need not be in conflict with each other. With this vision, we can fight back against fringe groups who insist that British Muslims are not capable of integrating into the UK. However, in order for British Muslims to be truly successful as engaged citizens, 3 things must happen. First, they must be recognised for every facet of their identity, as opposed to being forced into the token Muslim trap. Second, Muslims must no longer be viewed as a homogeneous group, and the expression of diverse intra-faith opinions and practices should be encouraged on issues such as wearing the headscarf, shaking hands with the opposite sex, and voting in democracy. Third, Muslims must avoid transplanting the politics of their countries of origin into British governance and civil society. Once these changes are in place, the oft-lauded vision of a pluralistic and harmonious society will be a few steps closer to reality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If it's okay, it's your turn.
Yeah, sure.
Will you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name is Abdullah Al Andalusi. I'm currently the Serving Director of Muslim Debate Initiative. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you all for coming. The subject of today's discussion shouldn't really be an important matter. The question, Muslims in the West, what is the way forward, is no more significant an issue than the way forward for Muslims living in the north, south, or east of the globe. Anywhere Muslims live, they are Muslim. The obligations of Islam to live obediently, purposeful lives to God and act in a moral and just manner, having concern for the well-being of Muslims and non-Muslims, is incumbent on all of us in every geographical location and time period. So why are we discussing this issue today? Well, we are discussing this issue today because the political powers that be raised it as an issue. Muslims were told that the West is liberal, and liberalism supposedly doesn't care what you believe or how you live as long as you obey the law. So Muslims did that, and our young generation started to become more pious than the older ones. But when it became clear that Muslims were still sticking to their identity of global ummahhood, the Western governments and media started screaming about integration problems, and Muslims weren't embracing Western ideas, values, or culture. And now multiculturalism is proclaimed as having failed, specifically because Muslims haven't adopted Western values. This is as silly as saying that the multiracial policy has failed because 30 years on from black immigration in the UK, black people are still black. It seems Muslims who immigrated here were lured under false pretenses. And what's worse, some Muslims have defected and embraced intellectual colonialization and are helping Western governments spy on the community and in the Muslim world and force their ideas of a reformed and liberally compliant Islam upon the rest of us. It is they, together with Western governments, who have made the topic of Muslims in the West into an issue, and now here we are debating it. Now the people here on the panel today are not representatives of the mainstream Muslim community in the West. In fact, some of them may even have an unpopular public persona. And certainly the beliefs of secularism and liberalism espoused by some of them are not Islamic concepts. And although my organization doesn't lead the community either, however, we do give a platform to mainstream Muslim speakers who defend and advocate orthodox Islamic thought in the public realm. Therefore, MDI, or myself, are not here today as leaders of the Muslim community. We are simply here as advocates for mainstream Islamic thought and Islamic interests of the Muslim community, both regionally and globally. Now, the reality Muslims currently face comprises 5 demands by the West that we need to respond to. The demand that we believe in Western values and ideas and secularize our beliefs and adopt Western culture. 2, the demand that we adopt the artificial political moral loyalty known as identity based upon citizenship and nationalism and leave the loyalty to the global ummah behind, or at least just second place. 3, the demand to leave all Islamic political work behind and pledge allegiance to the Western political system and supplicate to the liberal world order for our needs via participation in what is called democratic elections. 4, the demand by the West to join the ranks of its forces and spy on political dissidents within the Muslim community, fight against resistance fighters in invaded countries, and on the diplomatic front be used to export secular and liberal values into the Muslim world. Just look at the RAND report if you want more information on that. And obviously, number 5, the demand that Muslims refrain from working to re-establish the Islamic caliphate, which was torn down by secular forces 80 years ago. So considering that our interests are Islam, here is a rational response to these demands. Regarding the adoption of Western ideas and norms, Muslims should engage Western values and ideas through intellectual discourse. Not only will Muslims refute the intellectually pathetic attempts to reform Islam into a secular compliant religion, but we will challenge the very ideas of liberalism and secularism themselves and expose their irrationality and intellectual bankruptcy. We as Muslims should maintain our Islamic principles and develop independent networks that provide support for Muslims wishing to live according to them within the West. Regarding citizenship and nationality, no one chose the country they were born into, nor does a person's nationality dictate what is the truth, nor should it determine how we value humans, for example, caring about our countrymen over other human beings around the world. Aren't we all human? Are we all equal? Morality is not dependent on your geography, and what is fundamentally good and bad does not change with your environment, as some liberals say. That's like me saying if I go into a drug den, I can take drugs, or if I join a street gang, it becomes okay to rob people and use violence. My passport does not define who I am. I will not pledge allegiance to a country any more than I would have pledged allegiance to Blockbuster Video or Starbucks just because I have a membership or loyalty card. A passport is a thing of utility, not a testimony of faith. A Muslim does not need to be good for the sake of being a good citizen. Citizenship is not intellectual basis for morality. Rather, being a good neighbor, not littering, helping the elderly, giving charity, keeping the streets clean, being fair, honest and just to other people, not breaking the covenant with the country we live in, and respecting the morally compliant rules of the land, and not even drinking alcohol are things that Muslims are obliged to do wherever and whenever they are. Ironically, just being a good Muslim is enough to make someone a better citizen than the average person who lives in a society based on individualism. Regarding Muslim participation in national democratic elections, as Muslims, we believe only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the legislator, so to assign partners to his exclusive sovereignty in this area is what we call shirk, and all Muslims generally accept this basic Islamic doctrine. However, With the rise of Islamophobia and the far right, the Muslim community is currently scared and confused, and the current popular opinion is, vote or the fascists will get into power and kill you. So Muslims are told to vote in defense of their lives. However, this is a misunderstanding of the reality of how Western governments work. Do you think that the West would voluntarily expose itself to the possibility of the abolition of its own liberal values just by an unlucky election result every 4 to 6 years? Liberal democracy doesn't allow you to vote out liberal democracy. All we really get to choose is who is the figurehead behind the system. The fascists can only take over government if the majority of people want fascism, but this requires the state itself to collapse or to become too weak to repress them, like in Weimar Republic Germany. But if the majority of people, and consider this, the majority of people actually want fascism, then the question of who becomes the leader will be the very least of our problems. Muslim political participation should occur, but it should occur where the real power lies, with the people behind the system, not the system itself. Therefore, we should engage on our own terms by protesting, marching, lobbying, campaigning, raising public awareness about issues, petitions. These are not democratic things, these are universal things, by the way. This is the only real way for anyone to get their voices heard. Just look at the successful Zionist lobby in this country, and how many Jews are there in this country compared to the effect that the Zionist lobby has? You see, it's not democracy, it's lobbying. They didn't use democracy to get their will, why are we? Regarding the secular reformists and participation in the secret services, Muslims are humans like any other human group. You'll get weak ones, selfish ones, the generally confused, and of course the hypocrites. So we should not be surprised that some members of the Muslim community have opted to follow pragmatism over principle and sell out Islam rather than hold out for Islam. These people, and not all of them, but these people join the secret services to help spy on the Muslim community, including non-violent Muslim political dissidents, and deliver intelligence to their paymasters. This allows Western governments to construct strategies and single out dissident Muslim intellectuals for harassment and intimidation. Now, while I agree that all Muslims should maintain a covenant of peace with the Western lands that they live in and prevent terrorist attacks by any halal means necessary, but Muslims can do this without needing to join the secret services. And as for what to do with reformists, or modernists, or any other name they go by, we should counter their weak arguments at twisting Islam to support the Western agenda and ideology, and expose them for being intellectually bankrupt. Reformists are very shy to debate mainstream Muslims. They prefer being given an open platform to give their speeches with no one questioning them. They must be made to sit at the debating table and justify themselves. They have already gotten away with a lot of freely given Western media attention. It's time they were made to answer to criticism for their fallacious arguments about Islam. And finally, the objective for working to re-establish the caliphate. Muslims currently live in a world where there is no state that implements Sharia nor defends the Islamic interests of the Ummah or the interests of the weak and oppressed non-Muslims in the world. Islam obliges us to establish the institution bequeathed to us by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the Khilafah or Caliphate, to fulfill these obligations. However, Western politicians are trying to prevent us from doing so and have openly admitted their strategies to prevent us from working to re-establish this institution and sever us from our relationship with the rest of the global ummah. That's why they keep focusing on citizenship, nationalism, thinking only regionally and not thinking globally. We as Muslims must be resilient and continue to work for this vital obligation, using every available media, conduit, channel and bridge into the Muslim world to broadcast this solution back to the Ummah and join the rising chorus of global Islamic political campaigners working to re-establish the shield of the Ummah, the Khilafah or Caliphate state, until once again it lives and breathes in Muslim lands and expresses the true example of Islamic enlightenment, progress and justice for all the world to see. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm supposed to do an open discussion with Charlie between us.
A very exciting speech from the president. Okay, I won't keep you too long because I don't want to take away from the open discussion now. I'm sure everybody's eager to happen. But let's start with, I'm Paul Salahudeen Armstrong. I've been a Muslim since the year 2000 when I embraced Islam. Well, why am I Muslim? Now, a lot of people ask me that question, both from the Muslim, but people who are Muslims and also people in the wider society. I'm a Muslim as a matter of theology. Because as a Muslim, I believe that there's only one God, and I believe in this God has inspired prophets throughout human history, and culminating in Prophet Muhammad. This is the basis of our faith in Islam. This is the basis of what we call the Kalima Shahada, which, when a Muslim says that, when a Christian gets baptized, that's how a person becomes a Muslim. So ultimately, Islam is a matter of faith. Islam is not predominantly a matter of politics. Islam is not predominantly a matter of cultural practices. Islam is not predominantly a factor of all the other things that make up a society. Yes, it does touch on these things to some degree. When I eat, I make sure my food is halal, but what does that mean? You know, I can pop into a pub and order a cup of tea, order a fish and chips and a tuna sandwich. That is halal food. You know, I'm not eating anything haram by doing that. It's not haram for me to sit in a pub as long as I'm not consuming alcohol. And why don't I consume alcohol? Why don't I drink? There are a lot of people in this society who might be Christians, who might be of other faiths, and they do not drink and they do not consume pork as a matter of either health, or even in some cases because they've read it in the Bible, because pork is prohibited in Leviticus. And also drunkenness is spoken of as being evil in the Bible. It's condemned in the Bible itself. So it's like, there's a lot of people who I know who are actually born-again Christians who don't drink, and there are even some examples who don't even eat pork. So these are by no means universal to Islam. Now when it comes to dress sense, my Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he laid down guidelines on how to dress. He also says don't dress strange when you go to another land. You know, dress in garments that are suitable for that climate, and you know, that don't make you look out of place in that society. So as long as I'm covered, as long as I'm dressed modestly, I'm actually dressed as a Muslim. This is Islamic clothing. And everybody out here is dressed in Islamic clothing. You don't need to have a particular outfit in order to be dressed as a Muslim. If we look from Mauritania to China to Indonesia, look at the cultures which are regarded as traditional Muslim cultures. They vary quite markedly from one another anyway. You know, people have different types of dress sense. People have different ways they style their beard and their hair. People, and I'm talking about the traditional person. I mean, obviously now we've got globalization and people are following this sort of more generic, homogenized type of dress sense and culture wherever they are. But if you look at the traditional cultures, they vary markedly. Because Islam is a religion that embraces local custom and local culture. And this is what I want to get around. What is the solution for Muslims in the West? The solution is to embrace the culture where we live. Don't alienate ourselves from it and lock ourselves off in a little ghetto and make ourselves separate from it. If we do that, we will be our own self-destruction. It won't be anybody else who's doing it to us. We have alienated ourselves. And if we alienate ourselves from the wider society, what do we expect from the wider society? They are going to see us as strange. And it is us that have done that to our own selves. Nobody else has done that to us. How much time do you want me to?
If you've got another 4 minutes if you want.
Another 4 minutes, okay. So, I mean, we get back to this matter of culture. And this is, a lot of the things that we assume are Islamic today are things that people have tagged onto Islam. Siwa kameez are Indian clothing. Curry is a dish that is prepared in the Indian subcontinent and surrounding regions. These are not things which are part of Islam. I've got nothing against them if people want to dress that way or people want to eat curry. You know, curry is our English national dish now. So, according to the Sun newspaper. So, you know, it doesn't, these are not things which are taught by Islam. You will not find in the Quran, and thou shalt wear siwa kameez, or and thou shalt eat curry. It's not there. You know, it doesn't say you should eat fish and chips either. These things are left up to our own our own individual common sense. And these are things which are universal wherever you are. You know, people vary in their styles of dress, in what they eat, in various different aspects that have got tagged onto Islam. If we look at law is the thing which is most commonly discussed. You know, some individuals want to implement Sharia law in this country. Yet, how many of them realise that British law itself was based upon Sharia? Back in the day of Henry II, he was looking for a legal system for this country. The reason we have courts is it used to be the king's court. And the king was the judge. There was nobody else who had permission to be a judge in this society except for the king. The idea of training judges came from Henry II. Henry II wanted a legal system whereby he could send people out who were trained and had permission. Originally it was travelling courts. And then afterwards these travelling courts had courts in local towns and cities. And the idea of having trained judges, ideas such as, innocent until proven guilty, ideas about, waqf, trust funds. It's like waqf in Islam. It's a type of trust fund, a charity. These ideas actually came from the Islamic system that was present in Sicily at the time. And Sicily was a country that had been settled by Muslims for generations, and it had been conquered by the Normans, who, lo and behold, they're the cousins of the King of England. So I wonder where the King of England got this idea for his new legal system from. It's pretty obvious that he's been influenced by it, and he actually sent people out there to study it and bring back a version of this for the society. And if people analyse it, and even people that are trying to implement various aspects of Sharia law as it was interpreted elsewhere into this society, they are trying to fit it in to this society, in the form of contracts, to do with marriage, to do with divorce, this sort of thing. It's put down in terms of contracts in a way that fits into English law. Why can it fit into English law? Because English law itself is not incompatible with it. If it was fundamentally incompatible with it in the first place, that would not be possible. So what is we asking for if, some Muslims, they're asking for an Islamic society? Are they asking for a top-down tyranny? Or are they asking for, a method of shura to govern the society? Which is, in fact, what our Prophet taught. Shura is counsel. You have to have counsel with the people of the society that you're living in. Otherwise, you do not have legitimacy. Well, again, this is another aspect of our society in the West, which bears a striking resemblance to the society that was set up in Medina by our Prophet, peace be upon him. So it's like that, surely it's not incompatible, and if it's not incompatible, why should we tear it all down and start all over again? And I've put forward that it's only a minority of Muslims in this country who have put forward this idea. A very, very tiny minority within the Muslim community, never mind within British society at large. I think I'll leave it there and leave the rest of the discussion.
Okay, good, thank you very much. So now, although we have this thing that we have 40 minutes between the four of you, but I imagine that sometimes there will be not so much a question and answer, but there might be a contribution from the floor. And I would just like to mention here that we've got a very senior convert, David, and last time there was a meeting, you got very frustrated because you didn't really get much of a chance to make a contribution. So I'd just like to say that if you want to say something, you're very free to say so. And I don't know who wants to kick off.
I'll kick off.
Okay.
Take that for sure. I'm just gonna bullet points, try and keep it informal. Right? We've already become westernized. We are products of it. Liberalism, all this stuff that Brother Lowell was mentioning, we're living it. We're proofs of it. So to think that we could somehow stuff the genie back in the bottle, it's fantasy. Point on resistance fighters, I like that. Yes, in some places there are legitimate resistance movements. In the military construct, we call it insurgencies. Sometimes there is a confusion between what is terrorism and what is insurgencies. Obviously, residents of a country have every right to defend themselves against what they perceive to be an invading or occupying army. I have no argument with that. I like this point about covenant of the country we live in. It's a very important point, I think, especially from my perspective. Which leads me to the point about what are the halal means of preventing terrorism. And I do take this point about spying in the community. This is by nature a controversial subject, or by nature difficult, because you're dealing with gray areas. You're dealing with means which are based in deception, and then there's a larger discussion on what's the framework in which this kind of deception is permissible, for what purposes. Again, and I'll just make a general comment on the means by which spying is done. One of the things that I like to say is that I promote Sharia-compliant national security. And this always sends some of the agents into a spin. They're like, whoa, you said Sharia. So they get freaked out. But there are certain things that I consider to be permissible, certain things are not permissible. For example, the idea of entrapment, which is a big issue these days. Entrapment being, suggesting something to somebody that they would not otherwise do. And I thought of this as sharr al-waswas al-khannas, the whispering and the withdrawing. Okay, this I consider haram in that sense. Just moving on to my points. You want to get the support of the people, right? You want to mobilize the people. You want the people to be on your side. Yet you promote a separationist understanding. So the people themselves, who you're trying to get involved, they see that you don't want to be a part of the larger society. So you'll find it very difficult. Zionist lobby. Take lessons from them. They are a minority. They wield immense power. Why? Because they participated in the system. They didn't remain outside of the system. Mind you, they've had thousands of years of practice, and they've perfected the practice. But take lessons from them, that they have participated in the process, and that's why they are where they are. And just last point about Sharia being prevented in the world, and this is true, partly true. There are definitely, certainly in some schools of thought in the Western context, they don't want any Islam. As I was mentioning to the brother earlier, in some cases, any kind of open Islamic identity to them is a threat and a danger. And this does exist in their mindset. But Allah is great. And you can see that 50 years of dictators and Western-backed dictators has been turned on its head. And now Islamic parties are in power. So there is a way to do this. There is a way to go about this. And I think, this is just the last point, really at the end of the day, if we do not participate in the society and be a part of the society, as brother was saying, if we deliberately make ourselves appear to be, from the 8th century, looking like we've, come from 900s in the deserts of Arabia, then don't complain when people look at you like you're from the 8th century. And then when you start speaking in paradigms that are products of that century, then don't be surprised when people want nothing to do with it, because it does not reflect the reality of today. And that's really what I like to focus on. Not so much the theory. The theory is nice. The theory sounds wonderful. Tabligh Jamaat, maybe I'm traumatized from all the bayans. But, doesn't the theory sound nice? And this is why I said at the beginning, you're dealing with human systems. I don't want to start getting into the history of Islam itself. You can see that even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you had these differences, serious differences, which led to killings among Muslims. And if you want to talk about Khilafah and the Khulafa, 2 of them were killed by members of the Muslim community. And if you just go beyond the Khulafa, the Prophet ﷺ said in one hadith, I don't know the exact reference, but that after the 4 Khulafa, there will be biting kingship. So go through the history. Don't just fixate on one section of the Islamic history. You will see so many variations of Islamic rule, whatever that's supposed to mean.
Okay.
I want to make 2 quick points. Firstly, there's mainstream scholarly discourse that supports political participation. Sheikh Michael Mamis of Cambridge University wrote a wonderful paper a few years ago on how it's highly desirable for Muslims to vote in secular democracies. And he said that this actually fulfills the maqsid or goals of the Sharia. And he made a wonderful argument. Secondly, Cambridge University have also put out a paper called Contextualizing Islam in Britain, and the majority of the participants affirmed their support for procedural secularism, where the state remains neutral and different religious traditions are represented in the public sphere, but you don't have one dominating any of the others.
Thank you. Abdullah?
Okay, well, a number of points. Unfortunately, I will be the minority on this panel, so I'm going to probably have to answer against 3 people against myself, so I'll try my best. The point made by Mubin that we're already westernized, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's very interesting. What does westernized mean? Does it mean, what, I use a mobile phone? So mobile phones are attached to liberalism. So if you're liberal, only liberals can use mobile phones. No one else can use mobile phones or technology or anything like this. Technology is neutral, ideologically neutral. Anyone can use it. Clothes are ideologically neutral too. Anyone can wear it as long as it's covering the required parts. So I'm quite modern in all the technology I use, and I'm wearing a suit, but does it mean I'm westernized? Would a fellow Westerner or liberal say I'm a westernized person? No. Listen to my ideas, they say I'm totally not. As for, I would like Mubin to answer, since obviously Canada is involved in the war in Afghanistan, would you support the Mujahideen's rights to defend themselves against encroaching forces, which includes, incidentally, the Canadian Army? I would like to hear your point on that after this. I'll discuss what is the halal means of preventing terrorism a bit later, because there's other points I need to discuss. The points that how can we get people on our side if we want to be separatists? I didn't say I would be separatist at all. I just said that we would hold on to our values. That's not being separatist. Why is it being separatist if we're trying to hold on to our values? Maybe I could say the rest of society is being separatist to us because they're not following our values. That doesn't make any sense. And of course, democracy, if we all participate in democracy, it actually makes them more scared, because if they think that Muslims will vote for Islam and we participate in democracy, then the more Muslims you have, then the more Sharia you have in the parliament, and it's creeping Sharia, as that Tommy Robinson said. Whereas if we didn't vote, then non-Muslims would say, well, you know what, no matter how many numbers of Muslims there are, Muslims will never vote for their own, a Sharia system, and so our democracy or liberal democracy is safe. So if you want to vote, that's fine, but that's exactly what the EDO are scared of. Not because you'll vote them out, it's because you'll impose Sharia, and they're not alone in that opinion. The Zionist lobby you mentioned is exactly what I'm talking about. How many Jews are there in England, and how powerful are the Zionist lobby? And did the Zionist lobby get their power by putting an X on a little piece of paper and shoving it into a box? No. They go right to the people behind the system, and they influence those people, the media, and they get public opinion on their side, and they get a whole number of institutions, and that's how they get their power. If you want to do that, that's fine, but you don't need to go and put an X on a piece of paper to do that, Mubin. Now, as for, yes, in the Muslim world, all these dictators falling down, and Islamic parties are in power. That's a great way to get power for Islam. Oh, really? Well, that's quite interesting, because the Muslim Brotherhood recently dropped their slogan that Islam is a solution, because it'd be ruled as contravening a law on religious representation in government. It's a secular system, right? And in Tunisia as well, all these Muslim groups who had high hopes with it for Sharia now have to water it down, because the framework, the game they're playing, is against them. It's like going into a casino and trying to think you're going to win against the casino. The house always wins. Don't go and play the game. Don't gamble. You'll lose eventually. You might get a few little 10 quid here or 20 quid there, but you'll lose thousands in the long run. And of course, as for scholars supporting mainstream political participation, the only real major opinion I've heard is Muslim scholars saying that participate in democracy, otherwise they'll kill us or oppress us. That's what they're saying. Not, yes, you can do so, it's all great. Or, like I can quote you, I've got a whole list of 86 scholars here. If you want to play how many scholars can you name, I'm not going to drop names here, but who say it's completely haram to participate in democracy. So which is now the mainstream. And lastly, and they love to do this, that anyone who believes in a Sharia state or caliphate is an 8th century model, and we're in the 21st century. Well, firstly, the caliphate was last up until the 20th century, just the last century. It's only 80 years ago. If Israel can resurrect a 2,000-year-old state, yet we can't resurrect an 80-year-old state, that's like somehow irrational and absurd. It doesn't make any sense. No, it's very feasible to do so. And secondly, democracy predates Islam by 1,000 or so years. So democracy is 2,500 years old, but it's completely modern to talk about it. Why don't I say, well, you want to implement democracy? What, do you want to wear togas and act like Greeks and so on, and have hummus, whatever the Greeks did? Yeah, I can play that game too, if you want to play that game. The system is timeless. Technology changes, yes, but the systems are timeless. We'll just re-implement it with new technology. Where's the problem? So all this is completely fallacious. And as I said, they always try to misrepresent the belief, the Muslims who call for Sharia and Khilafah as some kind of old system and old, going back to camels and horses and so on, when none of us have said this. all Muslims believe that you can use modern technology. In fact, we should improve modern technology and progress and develop our science and our medicines and so on. In fact, I would like to surpass the West in technological production and industry and scientific development. And of course, last but not least, that in the early times of the Islamic State, there were civil wars and so on and so forth. Well, there were civil wars in America, and there was a French Revolution. That was a picnic, wasn't it? Yeah. So you had the Age of Terror, right? And committees who propagating reason, killing people in the name of prohibiting vice and promoting virtue in the name of reason. So we can play that game as well with European history, because European history isn't all flowers and rainbows.
Quickly, I have short points. Sorry?
I have a short point too.
Just on Mujahideen, this is an assumption that we need to get to the bottom of. If you speak to the Afghani people, they all claimed they were Mujahideen, didn't they? All over the years, everyone who came through claimed that they were doing it in the name of Allah. So this is an assumption, and we have to verify this or validate the assumption about Zionist lobby, and it's not just a matter of putting X on the paper. No, the reason why the Zionist lobby has the power they do, and they do go to the people around the politicians being directly elected, those lobbyists themselves vote. They don't just go and talk to the people behind the scenes and withdraw and leave. No, they mobilize an electorate who put X's on the paper. That's why. Drop the slogans in the Arab Spring. There are no sudden replacements. You cannot just come and put a new system in place after 50 years of a particular system. Allah Himself, in His wisdom, saw to reveal the Quran in stages. Why? He could have very easily just upside down the system, but He didn't, because there's hikmah in that. I think that was it. Oh, the last point about, I didn't say that the Khilafah is an 8th century idea. I said that issues of dress, I said paradigms from cultures based in the 8th century, to replicate those and to associate them with Islam is the mistake. We may agree a lot on a number of points on Khilafah, what it means, what it's supposed to mean. Certainly I do believe in principle anyway that Khilafah is the ideal system for Muslims, but we will disagree on the howness of it. And I think when Paul was mentioning about shura and consultation, this is where the howness may differ a bit. So those are the only points. They were short.
Okay. I think I really have to put in a point as chair that I want to remind you of recent Jewish history, that just over the way in Tower Hamlets there was a huge wave of Jewish immigrants for a long time before the Bangladeshis came, and they had to use the ballot box. They had nothing else. They had absolutely nothing. So I don't know why you insist on saying that they're manoeuvring behind the scenes with whatever powers that be, because that's not how it started.
Well, they fought against the British Union fascists in fisticuffs on the streets to resist them. That's how the British Union fascists was I think, a couple 80 years ago or so on, and they met them on the streets of East London with socialists, and they fought them physically. They got involved. So it wasn't the ballot box that saved them. It was in some cases their own.
They had come before then.
Abdullah, do you seriously think that made real change?
What?
The fighting people with fisticuffs on the street
I'm saying they defended
improved their situation.
Sure, I'm saying they defended themselves. And secondly, why are we not talking about the Jews of Stamford Hill? They like to keep to themselves. Why is no one hating on them? Why is that? You see?
Because they vote.
Why can't we? It's not because they vote. No one knows if they vote or not, right? No one goes around saying, "Oh, how many Jews vote in Stamford Hill?" And that's why we like them. No, it's because Judaism is not touched by the media. The media generates the hate against Islam. Right, and in the world before World War II, the media generated hate against Jews, and there was everyone hating against Jews in America. It was actually popular to hate Jews.
There's still plenty of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, but it was 100 times worse in 80, 90 years ago, when it was okay to hate Jews. Now it's okay to hate Muslims, and we are being misrepresented in the media, and now they hate us. And no one says we hate Muslims because they don't participate in elections. And actually, I've heard the opposite. The far right say the Muslims are trying to take over Parliament participating in the election. So the opposite is true. So I don't know how you'd answer that. And just one point to Paul. You said, Paul, that as Muslims, going to any society and following what that society considers to be modest is Islamic. So I don't know if you have a wife or a sister, but when you go to Florida, will you be making her wear a bikini because that's how they that's how they wear what they wear? but it's true though. It's considered to be normal fashion, normal fashion to wear bikini. Everyone wears it in those areas. Why not blend in? When in Rome, do as the Romans. Why don't you sectors be consistent?
That's a misrepresentation of Paul's argument. I think what he was saying was that which does not obviously conflict with Islamic law. So when he gave the example of eating a tuna sandwich in a bar, the law is don't drink. The law is not you can't eat a tuna sandwich.
Also, he's talking about personal choice. So it's not your choice about the bikini.
The bikini contravenes the.
I'm not talking about the Islamic perspective. I'm not talking about me making law for Florida. I'm not talking about that at all.
Excuse me, Abdullah. I did mention the word modesty. Now, obviously, a bikini is not modest. Generally, even most English people would not accept that a bikini is particularly modest. This is something which is worn at a particular place
in the beach.
Acceptable in that particular place on the beach. But if you walk through the middle of London in a bikini, then a lot of people would regard it as immodest.
So you're saying that Muslim women, from an Islamic perspective, can wear bikinis on the beach where it's appropriate to do so? Is that what you're saying?
He's not saying that.
No, not actually. I'm saying.
Sorry? You might be. Okay. You see, that's my point.
Sorry. As chair, I'm going to stop that one. David, would you like to say something?
I'm a bit confused about what Islam means in this discussion. Because we're talking about it as though it's self-evident reality, but it isn't. I noted down that there were simultaneously, historically, certainly three major empires in the Muslim world which manifested Islam in three totally different ways. There was the Umayyads in Spain, there were the Ottomans in Anatolia, and there was the Empire of Mataram in Southeast Asia. Now, each of them had their own understanding of Islam and their manifestation of it. So we can't talk about Islam as being a self-evident, holistic thing that everybody knows what it is. We're talking about something that is evolving in this context. In the United Kingdom, in Mubin's case, in Canada, and more generally maybe in the West, but I'm not interested in France. Places like that. And this country is not liberal in the sense that people talk about liberalism as a concept. This country is a constitutional monarchy in which religion, namely the Church of England and in Scotland, the Church of Scotland, are the established churches and therefore normative. And we all, immigrants, culturally, religiously, have to make accommodation to that reality. Even though that may be eroding fast, it's nevertheless the norm. Therefore, we make our relationships with study. So when people come up with this notion, as Tehmina mentioned, the survey about most British Muslims want to live under Islamic law, nobody actually asked the respondent what they understood by Sharia. Because if you put that point to the average Muslim in the street or the capital or wherever, what really is it that when you say Sharia, what do you actually mean by Sharia? And it comes down to how you fast, how you pray, and giving zakat, and so on. They're not that interested in lopping off hands and stoning people to death in Iran or Saudi Arabia, or things that actually are Sharia, which I dispute. They're talking about those things in everyday life, in everyday application of religion. And this isn't actually Sharia. Sharia is the moral code under which the law is evolved. You can talk about the Sharia of Christianity, Sharia of Judaism, and they're not that different from Sharia of Islam, that is the right and wrong, the good and bad, how we get to the Almighty. That's what. But when it comes down to the minutiae of Islamic law, it doesn't know that. And so we're bandying around words and concepts that come basically out of tabloid journalism. We talk about Mujahideen. Mujahideen, a person who struggles to put in his mother through university is a Mujahid. Some lunatic in Afghanistan or wherever who tells some child to found explosives around you and go and blow yourself up there, is not a mujahid. He is this is irhab. Now the interesting thing about irhab is under Sharia, irhab is such a serious legal concept that in the middle of a war between Muslim and non-Muslim, the parties can collaborate to hunt down because it is considered an outrage. It is under so when we talk about this, we're talking about something that previous Muslim scholars encourage Muslims and non-Muslims to collaborate together to put a stop to. This is what jihad has been reduced to. People doing things that are not acceptable. What is it that somebody blows up a car bomb outside of the or why is it forbidden? Because it is not specific. If you're fighting in a war, you're targeting an enemy, a specific enemy. You're not targeting a civilian. You're targeting somebody who's bearing arms against you. And even if in the middle of a battle, and I can't imagine how it could possibly be done outside the battle, somebody puts his weapon down and says, sorry, I'm not carrying a weapon. There's my AK, whatever. I'm not carrying a weapon. You can't. To kill him is haram. And so we go on. We need to specify what are we talking about.
Okay, can I just change something now? I want to take Paul's question.
It wasn't actually a question. It's just a comment, actually. I understand Abdullah is contramundum here this evening against the three speakers. It was just a kind of a point of order. Is it really appropriate for the chair to take sides as well and appear to be a 4-on-1?
No, I wasn't. It was about the Jewish people, and nobody sticks up for the Jews because normally in a Muslim environment there's a kind of taboo against that as well. So I declare that I have Jewish antecedents and I do not like hearing this kind of thing.
Excuse me? So I think you said he was actually not a Zionist, lobbying on the Jews who were the one who conflated Judaism with Zionism? Yes, that was Abdullah actually didn't conflate two issues at all. It was actually you before that.
Okay.
I remember comments on Jewish community in, I guess, a section of London which are separationists, I assume. Is that
was a response to the chess.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Can I just make a point as well that Sheikh Tariq al-Khadri at a recent conference in Wembley signed on to a London declaration where if people are using Zionism as a way to attack Jews or Islamism as a way to attack Muslims, and he says this is completely wrong. You know, we have to be very clear what these things are and not just use it as a cover to attack people.
Sure. Let's make a point to my brother over there. I did some study. I mean, I'm from Al Andalus originally, a Portuguese background, and the state in Al Andalus, the Islamic state in Al Andalus, although it was at one point politically separate from the main body of Abbasid caliphates, it was not a totally different form of Islam. The Sharia courts were still implementing. I mean, in terms of the Sharia, Muslims agree mostly about 18 to 90% of it. The rest is these small things, very small jurisprudential things, which lawyers and academics discuss, which there is difference of opinion on. But the main things, like the hudud laws, there was no difference of opinion on these very fundamental laws, which certain modernists like to deny today. Secondly, when Yusuf bin Tashfin reconquered Al-Andalus from disputing Muslim monarchs, he actually reaffirmed the pledge of allegiance back to the Caliph in Baghdad, saying that I want to subsume this back into reintegrate our state, Al-Andalus back into the Abbasid state, because there don't should be one leader, one ummah. Ibn Khaldun, the famous Andalusian as well, said exactly the same thing. So none of what I'm saying is new in Islamic scholarship or discourse. And I think we like to conflate difference of opinion on small things to difference of opinion on big things. And this is never the case. And as I would like to also mention that liberalism itself has 14 different madhabs on liberalism and 10 different schools of thought on its akida, individualism. How do you define it? And they can't agree. In fact, John Keeks once said, he's a political philosopher from America, he said that liberals can only agree, the only thing that liberals can agree on is the name liberalism. And they can't agree on anything else. So maybe that system doesn't work, and that system needs to be is impractical for today's world. Why don't we say that?
Well, I don't understand how the example of Andalusia and the giving loyalty to this one Khalif of Baghdad to then promote this unified ummah, again, we're taking an example of one place in history where an attempt is made to do that, yet by the time Andalusia is constructed, we've already had so many different systems, competing systems with one another. So the idea of a homogeneous Islamic system is not possible.
What different systems?
No, I want some more contributions now from the floor. I don't know whether to take a number at a time or one at a time. Should we just do one at a time at the moment? Okay. Gavin?
Yes, thank you. Just a very basic question for Abdullah. And first of all, as a convert to Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. And just, I am a convert to Christianity in Ireland. And, I just find some of your philosophy a bit kind of hard to kind of comprehend, because although my geography isn't great, I am aware that there are 65 million people in Britain, roughly, and I know, and the best I know, it's roughly 2 million Muslims at maximum. And assuming you are serious about your caliphate concept, what do you expect to do with other 63 million people who don't necessarily agree with you at this particular point in time? And, that's a bit of a problem,
Sure. It's one way a silly question. One way I wanted that question because there's some strange misunderstanding with and also with the media, how they portray Muslims who believe in caliphate, that we want to establish it in this country. I mean, come on, who wants to establishing in this country? It's a non-Muslim country. That's absurd. Yeah, I don't know why people. I get asked that question by a lot of modernists. I'm not saying a modernist, but other modernists try to say that about myself, and they try to tell other people, other Muslims, that Muslims want to establish caliphate in the UK. It's incorrect. It's the Muslim world. We want to establish. All Muslims want the Muslim world to revive itself, to free itself from foreign control, and to establish an indigenous system based on what we believe in, our worldview, which is Islam. So I'm not calling for caliphate in this country at all whatsoever. I think it's silly and absurd. It's a non-Muslim country. You first have to convert people to Islam first, and then you can discuss that. But because the people are non-Muslim, that's just a silly point. So it's the Muslim world we want to establish.
So your argument suggests that's what you do, and notwithstanding, forget whether I agree or disagree with your point. You can establish any way you want, but meanwhile, in the present moment in this country, you're currently active and doing things. And what's wrong with people who want to integrate into society through political and social means from doing that? Why can't we do that?
Okay, the word integration, what does that mean? I work, taxes get taken from my paycheck. I chat to people. I have non-Muslim friends. I like to frequent with them and discuss over a coffee and do all these things. Am I not integrated? Is this not sufficient? Do I have to do something? Do I have to start prostrating in the direction of the Parliament or number 10 Downing Street? Or what do you want from me? Well, what more do you want from us? Yeah, that's what I would tell the people who keep asking for integration. What does that mean then? I do all these things. I try to be a good citizen. I don't litter. I don't go out on a bender on Friday nights and shouting and cavorting. Drinking alcohol and so on. So I'm actually a better citizen than people who don't share my faith. So I don't know what more is required. As Muslims living in this country, we should be good examples for Islam and Muslims. We should help our fellow human beings because we're meant to help anyone around us. It's our constant obligation. And that's fine. But the global picture is that there's a problem in the Muslim world. We have a very unique position that we have there's a lot of conduits and channels and bridges into the Muslim world from here, via media and internet and so on and so forth. And we can use these channels to get the message to the Muslim world where a lot of these pro-Western dictatorships prevent us from saying it in their countries. Alhamdulillah, that's changing, but we can now use England as a jumping off point back to the Muslim world to actually help convey messages which would be suppressed by tyrannical secular regimes there. Okay. But inshallah, we're changing it from even in the Muslim world.
Okay. Can I just say something about the Khilafah is the fact that, firstly, I mean, as Sheikh Dawood has pointed out, and as Mubin Shaikh has pointed out, this is not a universally held concept, and even the people who understand the Khilafah, they understand it in different ways. I mean, if you look, the Shia, for instance, they go back to the earliest days of Islam and they don't believe in the Khilafah system. They have their own way of doing things. And, some people do takfir them and say they're not Muslims, but this is not the traditional position in Al-Sunnah. We respect that they're Muslims. Anybody who says the Shahada is a Muslim. You can't just go and takfir a mass number of people just because they disagree with the political system that the others want. The other thing is, I wonder, how viable is this concept of a Khilafah? I mean, we're discussing this sitting here in England, and Abdullah's already says he doesn't want to implement this in England. So basically, you've got a bunch of British people, and one of them wants to implement a Khilafah on the other side of the world, enforces upon other people who are trying to sort out their own systems of government themselves. I mean, we've just had the Arab Spring, they're all protesting, and, a lot of them don't seem to be asking for a Khilafah, they're asking for representative government. So it's like, who are we to then dictate to them and tell them that this particular model of Abdullah's Caliphate that we want to implement on these people? I mean, isn't this, no different to the accusation he's made towards the British and American governments of implementing their own system or trying to encourage them to implement democracy or something?
And I just want to go back to your points on political participation and media engagement.
Sure.
Well, firstly, voting is only one means of getting your voice heard. There are many different campaign methods available to us as Muslims. And my organisation, for example, has spearheaded a few initiatives to that end. I've taken part in a Young Muslim Leadership Network project, which aims to combat stereotypes surrounding Muslims in the media. We got a group of young Muslim women together to talk about the hijab and deconstructing stereotypes surrounding women who wear it. And the more we have these sort of projects, the better.
Okay. One interesting point. Uzbekistan was a very oppressive dictatorship, or still is a oppressive dictatorship. And it was killing political dissidents left, right and centre in the 90s. And this group which is much maligned, unfortunately, is called Hizb ut-Tahrir, started putting these stickers up all over London about who killed Farhad Usmanov, which was one of their members. Who killed Farhad Usmanov? And they put it up everywhere. And suddenly you had media interest, Uzbekistan in the spotlight, and Uzbekistan, the dictator, complained to the British Foreign Office that it's allowing HT, Hizb ut-Tahrir, to actually put political and media pressure on it. So I'm saying that basically a group which is condemned for not politically participating in the elections has actually done a lot of good for Muslims in the Muslim world. And that's what you get. You don't have to now put an X in a piece of paper.
That's a very slim point. That's a very slim point.
But okay, to answer Paul's point, so I'll be very quickly. Who am I to impose my ideas on the Muslim world? That's a very good point, because let's see what the University of Maryland World Public Opinion Poll says is the opinion of the Muslim world. When Muslims were asked, if you want to unify all Islamic countries into a single Islamic state or caliphate, we've got Egypt 70%, Pakistan about 70%, and Morocco 71%. And of course, strict application of Sharia, Egypt 81%, Pakistan 76%, Morocco 76%. So the real question is actually, so Paul, as a person who believes in secularism, who are you to impose your ideas on Muslims who are not believing in the majority?
He's not secular.
You're not Muslim secularist?
No, I'm a constitutional monarchist.
The perception.
Okay, that's a whole different ball game.
All right. Just a quick point. We heard a poll taken by the University of Maryland on the perceptions of Pakistanis, Egyptians, and others. And how are their perceptions working out exactly in the Muslim world?
I agree with that.
Not a good reference point to use.
Okay.
Why should you laugh at constitutional monarchy? In what way is that un-Islamic to start?
Oh, so you guys agree with Saudi Arabia then? You like Saudi Arabia? Are you fans of Saudi? I don't know if that's the case.
You're talking about the concept. I don't agree with the incumbent.
Okay. Yeah, but wait.
But okay, if they had a nice king come in,
that's a monarchy. He's talking about constitutional monarchy.
Wait, they do come as a constitutional monarchy as well.
Okay, but
are we going to pick and choose which constitutional monarchy we like?
I don't know. Ask Paul.
Abdullah, a constitutional monarchy is a monarchy limited by constitution, just like monarchy is limited by Magna Carta. But as far as I understand it, the Saudi king can do whatever he wants.
Do we have a constitution here in Britain?
Yes, we do. It's unwritten, but
okay, it's an unwritten constitution. Well, that's very interesting.
I need to take a point because these questions have been raised for a long time. Can I? Are you still asking your question, or is your neighbour? Your neighbour now.
Yeah, go. Hi.
I'd just like to make a point with my question, and forget about all the polls or whatever. You talked about the Arab Spring, and right now in the elections in the Arab Spring, who keeps winning the elections? In Egypt, the Islamic parties are winning. In Morocco, the Islamic parties are winning. In Kuwait, the Islamic parties are winning. In Libya, the Islamic parties are going to win. In Tunis, the Islamic parties are winning. So when you say people don't really want his system or the Islamic State, who are you talking about? Because let me finish my point, please. They're all voting for Islamic parties, and who got overthrown? I mean, we're talking about what's going to happen with an Islamic State. Let's talk about the reality. Who were the dictators? It wasn't the Islamic State, it was the secularists who were the dictators, who were oppressing the Islamists. And now, why did the secularists lose the elections? Now, an argument the secularists made is that they lost the elections because they were unprepared. Well, why is it that a new Islamic party, the Al-Nur party, if any of you know who they are, the Al-Nur party are a newly formed Egyptian political Islamic party who were formed after the revolution, and they came second place in Egypt. These people never got involved in politics. It would basically be like me entering politics after a revolution and getting successful in Egypt. So why are all of these Islamic parties winning and all these secular parties losing? Forget about your polls, forget about your polls, just look at the elections. So I put it forward to you. Who is winning the elections in the Islamic world or in the Arab Spring, and against who did they rebel against? And a question for you, please. You support secular democracy. What type of secular democracy? Because we keep talking about differences of opinion within the Islamic State. Do you support the French model, which bans headscarves, face covering, the cross, the yarmulke, or do you support the American type of secularism, or the British type of secularism, or the communist type of secularism, or the Chinese type of secularism? So you guys have your differences of opinion as well. So if you want to go against him, because he has differences of opinion within his own school, then you must be consistent and throughout your own ideology as well. Because British secularism is much different to French secularism. So, and Paul lives in France, he lived in France, and he can tell you all about that. The two different secularisms. So you need to be consistent. Thank you very much.
That's because this country is a constitutional monarchy and we didn't kill our kings and institute a secular system.
Right.
But the thing is, if you look at these countries that we're talking about, the majority of people in these countries are Muslims. So it's hardly surprising that they're going to vote for parties which are in some way influenced by ideas of Islam or ideas from Islamic history. That's not a surprise there. But having said that, you've got different parties that want to implement these ideas in different ways. I mean, as I talked about in Egypt, you had the Muslim Brotherhood, and you've also got the Salafists. And they have different ideas on things, and they don't even get on with each other a lot of the time. If you look in Turkey, the party that's currently running Turkey is an Islamic party. But the state's still secular, and they're actually an Islamic party that says, you know what, we're going to keep the secular system because it works quite well in Turkey. But at the same time, they're saying, you know, no more banning of headscarves, certain things they want to push through. But they're not trying to set up a khilafah.
Can I just pop on that quickly? Same point about they want to implement it in a different way. I'm a big fan of the Islamic parties coming into power, very happy. I hated the tyrannical secular governments. They created militant Islamism by their violent oppression of these groups, by isolating and marginalizing them from the political process. Muslim Brotherhood, the reason why they fell out of favor with so many of the Islamist groups is because they participated in the political system. Again, back to them wanting to implement different systems. Tunisia, Al-Nahda party. Did you hear what he said about the inherent dignity of gays? Because he was in prison under these tyrannical regimes. He realized that chances are that's not a good thing to do. The Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt picked a Coptic Christian candidate over the Salafi candidate. So you're right in the sense that I am totally on side with the Islamic parties coming to power, but we must realize that even they understand. They don't, first of all, they don't call for a complete automatic instant application of Sharia, whatever that means. and immediately over the people. They realize that there are some things you can get away with and some things you cannot.
Can I make a point?
I'm glad you asked that question, and I support the British model of procedural secularism that I described earlier. I'm actually very much against the French model of ideological secularism. I was at a conference in Deauville in France last year where I spoke about religious and secular values, and I actually criticised manifestations of the French model of secularism, such as the niqab ban.
Okay, Abdullah.
Okay, just a few quick points for people posed to me. Again, what should I do in this, if I envision caliphate, which is implemented from an orthodox, let's say, Sunni perspective about Shias? Well, the same thing that, I could quote you classical Shia clerics and scholars who basically said that only the Mahdi can be the caliph, but the Mahdi is not around. So until he's here or comes back, we should live within the Sunni caliphate and wait until the Mahdi returns. Shias have always been living in a symbiotic relationship with Sunnis on this. Now, there was some intolerance from certain Sunni quarters, that is true, and that's very unfortunate. As Muslims, we shouldn't be intolerant. However, the issue of caliphate is not disputed matter in any classical scholarship. I challenge anyone here to show me classical scholars disputing on the very basic model of caliphate. You won't find it. But I will have a question for Tehmina. You see, you're against the French ban of the burqa, and in your secularism is very different. However, your founder doesn't seem to agree. Yasmin Alibai-Brown said, I quote, "The French are right to ban the burqa," and Dr. Taj Hagi, who's one of your trustees, actually had a niqab or burqa burning, like Pastor Terry Jones, but with the burqa instead. So, my point to you is, do you condemn what they say and their beliefs and their opinions and what they did?
We make it very clear that the personal opinions of individual trustees are distinct from the opinions of the organisation.
Even the founder.
And Yasmin Alibai-Brown actually wrote a piece in The Independent last year where she said that bans are too harsh. So I would like to know where you got this reference from.
Oh yeah, sure.
Is it older than that?
No, you can Google it. She says they're right to ban the burqa. Okay, fine. If you change your mind, that's great.
Yes,
it's good
and
to
she
change
did.
your mind. Well, that's excellent. But again, Dr. Taj Hagi had his own way of expressing how the banning of the burqa. So all I'm saying is that's great. But you see how secularists are divided and have different opinions. Because a hard secularist might say my secularism is just as legitimate as your soft secularism, and you can't. And fine, you have your opinion. That's really great that you're tolerant. But some of your fellow compatriots in secularism don't agree with you, and so how can you now implement a secular state when there are different ideas of secularism which you're all fighting? Should we hope and pray that your faction of secularism wins, and that Europe remains tolerant? Or we should be worried that maybe the other faction might win, which they're seeming to be increasingly winning with the banning of minarets and the banning of burqas and the banning of even halal meat spreading throughout Europe. It seems you're a minority faction amongst secularists. It's unfortunate.
Okay. Well, we just finished talking about how we're seeing different styles of implementation of Sharia, and it would follow that any kind of khilafah system would similarly have these kind of variances. So I don't think that's a strong argument. I appreciate your fans, but I think just as there is a difference of opinion on the secular side, you will find the same difference of opinion on the Islamic side.
Okay.
To put it into context, that it's not just cut and dry.
Can I take a point then?
Can I just ask to anyone on the panel? Islam is a religion, it's a faith, and it's supposed to be a guide to our lives. So why are Muslims the only one who want to get into the political side of running a government when there are other religions who don't seem to be having this trouble with dealing with secularism, living in Western countries? At the end of the day, it's your personal choice, and Islam is supposed to be teaching you about following your Prophet's way, which is the middle way. So why are we finding ourselves?
To be honest, there's a lot more broad opinion on these sort of things within the Muslim community, within Muslim scholarship is often suggested. And there's a vast richness there which we often don't see in the West. When Imam Jafar as-Sadiq was asked on this thing, and Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, a lot of people think of him as Shia, but let's remember, there was no Sunni and Shia in the way we understand them now, because this scholar was somebody who's in the Naqshbandi Silsila, so he was a Sufi Sheikh. He's also a scholar who taught the other scholars at the four madhabs who started them. So it's like he's a universal scholar in Islam. And when he was asked if he wanted to be involved in the Caliphate, he said, I don't want to be involved with those people. you know, because he can see the corruption. I don't want to be involved in that. So it's like, this is by no means cut and dry.
I think it's Abdul Malik, who was the Khalif at the time of Imam Malik. When he saw the Muwatta, he said, I want to use this Muwatta, and Imam Malik was like, no, this is the point of this is not to make it the law of the land. So just, again.
Okay, do you have a point?
Yes. Marwan wasn't talking about making one law the laws of the land. He was making a theological point about establishing this hadith book as the hadith book which everyone must adopt. And so that's not political. As for Imam Jafar Sadiq, he was criticizing the Khalifa, not the post of Khalifa. The guy who's occupying that post, not the post itself. There is a difference. But to answer your question, sister, the reason why we as Muslims don't have a problem, so we do have a problem with secularism and this integration issue, and secular integration, is because Islam has political aspects of it which is very, very simple, like from the Quran, and rule between them by what Allah has revealed, and follow not their vain desires, diverging you from the way of the truth. And there are so many, judged by what Allah has revealed, and there's so many points. So the reason that we have an issue with these things is because the Jews were a very minority group, and so they had to decide, living in Europe, living in a diaspora, that they can't live by Judaism, and there's a problem with obviously Israel on the Temple Mount and establishing Jewish law and all that stuff. But the Christians started out almost, you could say, from the get-go almost secular, with St. Paul going to Rome, and when you're in Rome, do as the Romans. And so he integrated into Rome, and this is why you have a Christian religion, which is arguably has a lot of pagan theological concepts as well as practices, and the abolition of Mosaic law, because St. Paul was the first secularist. That's why Christians differ from us, unfortunately.
I think there's a lot of theology that needs to be researched here, so I'm going to take another question. What is your question?
Just a question and a comment. I'm a British Muslim, I'm born here, I've never left here. When we talk about integration, this is purely subjective, but what I find a barrier to integration is when he's talking about insurgencies, someone is about suicide bombers. When he's talking about lobbying and the legitimate success of our Jewish brothers and even Zionists in lobbying governments, you respectfully heard something which resembled a Zionist conspiracy. You see, we're hearing two different things. And then when he talks about, that a caliphate is a legitimate system of government, someone else hears about imposing Sharia law in the UK. So there's a kind of epistemological bias here. I think this is what he's trying to get at, and why things come across as kind of confrontational. Because if you were to sit here and talk about how great secularism is, I wouldn't say, aha, you're trying to impose this on the Islamic world and Saudi Arabia. No one thinks that, right? But if he says, I think the Sharia is a good system and Caliphate's a good system, you automatically assume, not all of you, but certain people in the audience, I'm not saying it's deliberate, but there's this kind of bias, you're like, yes, he's trying to impose it. So that's one point. And then a point of clarification, I'm not going to ask Mubin to answer the issue about, does he support the guys in Afghanistan? This is a controversial thing.
It's okay, I don't have a recording device.
Yeah, it's, but I'd like Paul to answer the question about, do you think it's legitimate to change your dress code, even if it is relatively immodest, right, according to the circumstance? Just be clear on it. It's your own opinion, there's no harm. And do you condemn Yasmin Al-Bayram? Because I have heard that she's on public record as saying that. Do you condemn her for saying that, rather than just saying you don't share that? Do you not think that's an excessive thing to say, that the headscarf should be banned? Or the niqab?
She's never said the headscarf should be banned.
No, the niqab should be banned.
The niqab, okay, the niqab.
Like I said, she doesn't have that opinion. I'll show you the article.
Anymore.
If she had that opinion, do you condemn people in general who hold that opinion, Yasmin or not?
Well, I've made it clear that I don't agree with that opinion. I'm happy to debate those people. There's a press release on our website which explains our reasons for opposing the niqab ban, and that was approved by all the trustees.
That's fine, but Yasmin did go on record and say that, and she is kind of an important person in your party. So I think, as a Muslim, if you are hoping to represent Muslim women, or women in general, you shouldn't tell them what they can and cannot wear. I don't like it when Muslims tell women, force them how to dress, and I don't like it when people from, even if it's your party and you're trying to represent women, you also should do women that courtesy of not telling them how they can and cannot dress. I know you don't do it personally, but Yasmin does. I don't think it's appropriate for someone who claims to represent the Muslim community.
Point of clarification. I read on the British Muslim Secular Democracy website where they discussed, and it's meant to be a secular organisation, but they discussed the Islamic merits of, or demerits of niqab, where they say it's not based on our sources, it's a cultural accretion, it's not from Islam. So, and a secular group is now telling Muslims their theology. I mean, isn't that counting?
We have two theologians on the board, and that's their opinion.
But what's that got to do with your political work? You're secular, aren't you?
So they can't express an opinion on niqab, or whether it's required? Is that not allowed?
But when talking about a niqab ban, why are you having theologians now talking about what the Islamic position on it? When you're talking about niqab ban?
There were two things. That one was a press release on the niqab ban in France, and we opposed that. And the other was a position paper on Muslim women's dress.
I read that. I didn't actually see you even condemning. You just said it was ill-formed. That was it.
We did condemn.
Not they were wrong or they were incorrect. Okay. Maybe I read the wrong one then.
Can I just jump? Just point of clarification.
No.
I know. I just wanted to agree with you and just second the motion that if you do feel that your views are being misrepresented, you should respond in that way. So let us not assume that somebody is making this argument and then reply to an argument that's not being made. It's one big exercise in strawman fallacy. So just for the speakers also.
Now, just to finish, Paul, do you want to talk about
Yes. Well, firstly, I'm not telling people how they should and shouldn't dress. I mean, there are two extremes. There's naked and a burqa. And these are two extremes. Islam teaches us not to go to extremes. It tells us to follow the middle way. Now, there's differences of how people want to dress, and even if people dress in sawakamis and stuff, they're going to style them differently. I don't have an issue with people dressing in sawakamis. I don't have an issue with people dressing in thobes even. I don't have an issue. If people want to dress in niqab, that's up to them. I'm not going to tell them that they can't dress that way. I do not believe in bans on any form of clothing. However, the thing that I was trying to raise is that there are consequences of how we dress. If we dress in a way which will alienate us, let's say instead of dressing like this, I dressed in something else like an army outfit and a balaclava. Now, legally, I'm allowed to dress that way. I could walk around the grid. Let's say I believed that theologically, according to my understanding of religion, that was how I should dress. Nobody can tell me that that's wrong. I mean, people will tell me. But if I really believe that, then I might carry on dressing that way. Now, it would be, in my view, an infringement of a person's human rights if you stop them from dressing that way, except to clarify their identity in security situations. In that particular situation where it's important you have to identify, then that's different. And even Islamic scholars have said, as far as women in burqas, if they are stopped at the security checkpoint and they have to reveal their identity, then they should. That's not up for debate. But all I was raising is there are consequences of how we dress, and to just think about it ourselves. And, that's for something for each of us to take away and decide how we should dress. And I'm standing up for people's rights to dress how they want. What you tend to find is you get religious scholars, some religious scholars or people that represent fringe groups, and they are telling people that they should dress a certain way. That's what I'm opposing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, you haven't heard from you.
Thank you very much for a very lively debate. My questions are mostly directed to Abdullah. Abdullah actually called for an open debate for whom he labeled modernists and liberals. I seem to fit that description. I would like to take you up on your offer. Unfortunately, I don't really think Abdullah meant it, because if you visit his Facebook page and you disagree with him, you get blocked. And I suffered that fate, unfortunately. I'd like to formulate this debate, if I can. I find that the ones who are pro-Sharia in the classical sense, they are attacking other ideologies by saying that these ideologies have different versions, different interpretations. This is very true. It's what Mr. Shaikh called human systems. But I think we are all missing the point here, because the proponents of Sharia in its classical sense, in its imperialist fascist sense, say it's God's law. That's one thing we keep forgetting. They say this is God's law, you need to follow God's law. Abdullah said it in his opening speech. This is God's law, we are following God's law. So in the Quran, Allah says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. Do you not contemplate on the Quran? If you find, if it was from other than Allah, you would find in it اختلافًا كثيرا, many contradictions. That is exactly Sharia law. Sharia law has many contradictions. Abdullah said that no, these contradictions are very, fluent. They are very minor. They are dealing with minutiae. This is not true. This is not true at all. Sharia law actually cannot even agree on its sources, let alone its pronouncements. Sharia law can't agree on how many verses of the Quran are abrogated. They cannot agree on the definition of the Sahaba. They cannot agree on the definition of ijma. So there is no consensus on the definition of consensus. That's Sharia law. That's the reality of Sharia law. Abdullah actually used a very interesting example of Sharia, and in its sloganist sense. He said, if you believe in Allah, you have to judge by what Allah has revealed. He quoted chapter 5, verse 48 of the Quran. Unfortunately, as usual, he gives no references and quotes half a verse. That verse actually refers to the Quran. Check it, please. So, what I'd like to say is, let's not be fooled by slogans. God's law does not necessarily mean God's law, because a human being always interprets God's law. Just because medieval Muslims agreed that the Khalifa was the best institution, which is actually not entirely true. The Khalifa was simply a carry forward of the tribal leadership continuing prior to Rasulullah. Just because they agreed to it, that doesn't mean we have to agree to it. We have to agree to the agenda of the Muslim as an individual, and that is to do good, amal salih. That is what we need to agree on. There is no such thing as the Khalifa in the Quranic sense of the word. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'd like to respond. No, it's really great people can come to my Facebook page and want to debate me. However, when they start spamming 5-10 posts in the space of a day, it kind of gets a bit excessive. And then when I challenged you to debate me on private message, suddenly you weren't so eager anymore. So one wonders, who was your audience? Was it me, or was it your some kind of popular self-gratification? In terms of, let me respond, please. In terms of him he heard me say that liberalism and secularism has different versions, so how can it be implemented? And what about Sharia? No, you misunderstand my point. My point was answering what the old argument that liberals and secularists say against us, which is you can't implement Islam because there's too many versions of it. So I'm saying in response to that, you have more versions and more difference of opinion than us. In fact, an insane amount. In fact, you can't even agree on the meaning of the word liberalism or secularism or anything like this. And there's so many versions of it, yet it's a practical system. But when we, who have much more consensus and much more agreement, want to implement a Sharia or caliphate, no one agrees, it's impractical. It's the double standards and hypocrisy of secularists and liberals. That was my argument, sir. That was my argument. Anyway, as for you mentioned did not contemplate the Quran. Had it been from other than Allah, there'd be many different there'd be contradictions and so on and so forth. Now, the Sharia is basically the interpretations of texts or ordinances or orders and commands from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we were ordered to obey in the Quran, obey Allah, obey His Rasul, and those in authority amongst you. What you are actually arguing, if you truly think about it, is anarchy. No government, because all governments are implemented by human beings, and the Khawarij said exactly what you said. That only God, only the Quran, no other human intermediaries. They were anarchists, and what you're arguing is very Khawariji-like. It's very anarchist, and I don't agree with you. I don't say that the interpretation of Sharia is divine. I say that it's the best human attempt to follow Islam and implement God's law. And God only asks us to make the best attempt. He doesn't ask us to be the Pope with inspiration that knows what. So we do the best attempt looking at historical sources to say, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? What did the majority of the hadiths, which generally all concur with each other, what did they say? There are a few strange hadiths. That's fine. I agree with this. But that's why we have the science of hadith. That's where we have the continuation of the science of Rijal. All these different things were scholarly tools to check our sources very rigorously, and a lot of modern day scholars have actually praised it being more rigorous than the Western historical system, the system looking at history. And lastly, The issue of caliphate as a continuation of tribal leadership, fantasy. Pure fantasy. There is not a shred of evidence, no single narration that they took it from, that the caliphate, which no Arab had ever used, ever. We don't hear any Arab talking about, yes, we have the new caliph of our tribe. You don't hear this. What we do hear is the Prophet Muhammad saying this in many narrations. I'll just quote one. The Prophet Muhammad said, the Israelis, or the Bani Israel, used to be ruled and guided by prophets. Whenever a prophet died, another would take his place, but there will be no prophets after me. There will be khulafa, who will increase in number. Then the people asked, "O Prophet of God, what do you command us to do to these khulafa?" And he said, "Obey the one who will be given the pledge of allegiance first and fulfill their rights." Obey as many, all different kinds of caliphs. They can have many, we're all plurality. No, obey the one who's given the pledge of allegiance first. And that's to the Muslims. So the Muslim Ummah must obey the one who's given the pledge of allegiance first. And the word Khalifa is mentioned here. It's also mentioned in the Quran. It's mentioned in so many other narrations. It's so much so that the invention that the Khalifa is now some modern construct or a construct of pagan tribe is pure fiction, pure fantasy, and ahistorical.
Very short.
We're down to our last 10 minutes now, so I'll just like to ask if anyone hasn't asked a question, quickly ask it.
It's a short quip on Sharia versus fiqh. You mentioned only Sharia and not fiqh.
Thank you. I think the panel have had plenty of time. Yeah. It's just a very small point. A secularist, or to use another term, a materialist, a person who's a non-believer and who has no religious faith, may be a communist, or liberal, or fascist. There isn't a uniform sort of political philosophy to which non-believers all adhere. I'd just like to make that point, because I'm a non-believer and I'm a materialist, but I wouldn't even call myself a secularist, because I think that's already adopted a bad name, because a lot of secularists have become very intolerant of other people's religious freedoms. So even those of us who are, I would say, militant materialists also do have deep respect for other people's spiritual faiths and adherence. But to start confusing religion with politics, I think that this evening there's been too much confusion. Because Brother Abdullah, I respect you in many ways, but I feel that you're being very contemptuous of people who are neither Muslims nor believers, and I think that's very unfair. I mean, where do we belong? Are we to be exterminated? Not by you, even in the Middle East. I mean, I know Tunisia quite well, and I agree that the Islamic parties have had a huge vote across the Arab Spring for very good reason and for very legitimate reasons, because they're offering people something they've never been offered before. But there are a lot of secularists in these countries who are Muslims and who are very frightened of what's going to happen to them and what place they're going to have in those societies.
Okay.
Yeah, Farouk was only saying that the law hadn't been interpreted properly in a sort of romantic sense, I think. And I think that that's why you have lots of secularists, people, and they don't get around to saying that they follow this or that, because there's all these Egypts charging around, clobbering each other and arguing.
Okay, I think...
I just want to say...
Paul Scott, University of East Anglia. Very briefly, liberalism's got many faults. It's also got some real strengths. It broadly allows people to follow the religion they want to and to adopt differing political positions. It also allows people to reject certain politics, religions. I was brought up in the established church. I rejected it. My concern with the Caliphate, would it allow somebody to reject the religion they were brought up in? Would it allow somebody to reject that religion and go to a different system of belief or different political system, or to stand up and say, I don't believe in any of this nonsense, it's all rubbish? That's what liberalism allowed me to do as a teenager. Does your religion allow somebody who follows your religion, Abdullah, to stand up and say, you know what, this is nonsense, I don't want to do it?
Yeah, it happened. There were famous debates in the Muslim world. In Baghdad, there was a whole bunch of atheists there. I don't know why they're in Baghdad, but there was a whole bunch of atheists, and they were debating with Muslims, and Imam Abu Hanifa, a very famous classical scholar, debated atheists famously. There was a Jewish scholar called Ibn Quraysh who wrote a scathing attack against Islam in Al Andalus, and Ibn Hazm Al Andalusi, who's a classical scholar again, responded to him with a book refuting his book. So, and his book was being published in the Muslim world. So you had books criticizing Islam being published in the Muslim world. So we don't mind debate, we love debate. In fact, my organization is a Muslim debate initiative, because this is what my Islam tells me. It's what Islam tells all Muslims, that we love debate. Because debate is just about finding the truth. It's not about gratuitous insult. There's a difference between gratuitous insult and intellectual endeavor, intellectual discussion, debate, and we're all for that. But I would say that liberalism is actually quite intolerant. It's very intolerant of anything that's not liberalism. And it's always comparing itself to every other system. So the reason why the government has all this prevent funding and all this prevent counterterrorism funding, it's not against militancy or violence. It's against extremism, i.e. people like me, Muslims who actually believe in Orthodox Islam, we're the extremists, and now we must be dealt with, persecuted, harassed, intimidated. Programs must be designed against us. Organizations must be funded to refute us.
I don't think that's what prevents.
So,
what's going on?
Well, look, fine, you may think that.
The surveillance.
You may think that, but the scholar Tim Winter, for example, the scholar Tim Winter did an excellent speech on can liberalism tolerate Islam? And his conclusion was that it couldn't. Liberalism is by definition only tolerates itself, and any religion that gets with the program, i.e. secularizes itself, and then becomes an abstract and irrelevant spiritual doctrine which has no political effect or ramification. And just on that
but he was defining Islam in a special way for the purposes of the article as well. So it wasn't just democracy, it was also Islam.
Look, Islam means something. The word is not just a vacuous concept. It actually stands for something. And if you try to say Islam means...
But nobody can agree what a Muslim actually is.
What a Muslim actually is? Well, yes. I think there are a few things we can agree that a Muslim actually is. Someone who believes in God, for one. I'd like to see a Muslim who believes in three gods or no gods and say, I'm a Muslim. You're not. Islam stands for something, not for nothing, or you can say do with it as you please. And just the last point was that woman over there who said that you're worried that non-Muslims or atheists or whoever will be eradicated. And this is all... Yeah, you did. Right. This is a common, it's a common misconception. As soon as you talk about Sharia, there's honor eradication and so on and so forth. The West has had a much larger history of eradicating those it disagrees with or people it's suspicious of than the Muslim world. So, if anything, if you look historically, I think the question we should ask is, are Muslims' days numbered in the West, considering all this historical precedence? We don't believe in eradication. That's why we have Jews, Christians and Muslims living in the Muslim world. We had atheists famously in the past. Al Andalus, where I was from, was very famous for Jews and Christians, Muslims living side by side. It's so much so that you had Jews were in the Muslim armies, for example, as generals and so on and so forth. So
that's okay, but the other way is not allowed.
Yeah, so
it's a good point actually about Andalusia. Maimonides wrote extensively against some aspects of Islamic theology, and he was the personal physician to Salahudeen.
Yeah.
Right? So I think there is a disconnect with. There's a lot of theory in what Abdullah is talking about,
and history.
I subscribe to a lot of the theory. It's good in the theory, but you can see in its application there are variations in its application, and today. And we're not going to make the argument that these are Muslim countries or Muslim systems, but if you see today, this is why none of us who talk about establishing khilafah in the Muslim world would actually live in the Muslim world. We're quite happy living here, aren't we? And just the last point on can liberalism tolerance, it's good that you quoted Abdul Hakim Murad. He's a very, very good scholar. I think it was Habib Umar who said that, rahimahullah, who said that he's the Ghazali of our age. Wallahu a'lam. But at the end of the day, look at what liberalism has tolerated just here in the UK. I mean, it's called Londonistan for a reason, right? So they clearly haven't enacted any pogroms or any kind of... And in fact, if you look, I really don't know the exact situation in the UK, but overall, if you look, after 9/11, and even I myself was very afraid. I told, now Muslims are really going to get it and this and that. And there have been, of course, this is natural, this will follow these kinds of tensions. But if you really look, Muslims are not being mobbed and beaten in the streets, strung up on trees, burned alive. These things are not happening. I personally believe that Allah protects us, and alhamdulillah, but if you really see at the end of the day, we're living a pretty good life here. I don't see anybody really complaining. So there's got to be something good going on.
I would like to take this lady's point that you made about the fact that there's liberals and conservatives and communists and whatever in wider society. I would like to point out that I'm sure that there is the very same thing among Muslims, both within this country and around the world. Now, in many cases, they might try and take that back and sort of back it up with some kind of reference from the Quran and from hadiths and things like this to back up their beliefs. But at the same time, you will find within the Muslim, both within the Muslim community here and around the world, you will find people who are more liberal, people who are more conservative, people, and I think this is natural. This is how people are. And the only bit that I am a bit concerned about, to be honest, with the idea that many people push forward with Sharia is this gentleman's point. A lot of people, it's like we have a person here on this table who has said that I am an Orthodox Muslim. So, I just hope, I'm sure he didn't mean to takfir the rest of us, but it's kind of that kind of representation that you tend to get from people that are putting forward a version of Sharia. Now, at the same time, if I wanted to, I haven't actually said that. I have more authority to say that, because I'm in the Association of British Muslims, which was founded by Sheikh Abdullah William Henry Quilliam, who had the authority from the Ottoman Caliphate in order to, So my organisation actually has more ijazah to say that. But I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm an Orthodox Muslim and nobody else is.
It's misrepresenting me. I didn't say I was Orthodox Muslim. I said that I'm trying to defend and advocate Orthodox Islamic views. And Orthodox is very plural. There's so many opinions within Orthodoxy. Right? But when there are people who have opinions which go outside of Orthodoxy. So it's Orthodox to believe in one God, but if you believe in two gods, that's unorthodox. Right? If you believe that in Islam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator and the legislator, to believe that he's not the legislator or that he shouldn't legislate is unorthodox. Now, what he legislates can be debated, but if you believe that his legislation shouldn't be implemented in human life, that's unorthodox, and there's no precedent for this in Islamic scholarship. Even though Islamic scholarship is very varied, and so I think you've misrepresented me, sir. And secondly, you're not the only organisation that claims some kind of Quilliam authenticity. I believe there's another, and they're just as popular as you.
By association,
true, but then don't start name dropping. We will start ayah Quilliam, so now we preserve his sunnah. You don't preserve the sunnah of Quilliam.
Okay, have you got any other thing? Have you finished?
My last point is that people who advocate Sharia don't live in a Muslim world. I was born here. I have a British passport. If I immigrate here and I stay here and whatever, then I see your point to some extent. But that's not the case. And with all the niqab bannings and the burqa banning, and in your country, Mubin, when they tried to persecute this shop, but the media headhunt this shop for the Maududi, having a book by Maududi.
No, it was Ashraf Ali Thanvi's.
No. There was one before that as well. So they're looking into what we even sell in our bookshops. Yeah, this is tolerance.
Well,
this is
when
not.
You have a book
okay.
When you have, Ashraf Ali Thanvi, Indian scholar.
I've got to take one more.
Sure, this is not tolerance, though. Muslims feel persecuted and pressured.
It is intolerant to have a book from an Indo-Pakistani scholar from the 1930s. Talking about how you can hit your wife this way or that way.
Yes,
that's ridiculous.
Isn't that liberalism? Isn't that liberalism though? Liberalism says you can have any book you want.
Advocating that you're validating striking women in a domestic relationship. That should be thrown in the garbage and disassociated.
No. False dichotomy. There is Mein Kampf book by Hitler being sold in the shops. That's okay. It's okay to sell Mein Kampf in the bookshops, but when you have a book which is from the Muslim world, I don't agree with it necessarily, but when you have a book from the Muslim world, that's bad. We can't tolerate that. Have you seen? He's just proved my point about how tolerant these liberals are. See how tolerant they are, everyone? See how tolerant they are.
There are so many other books. There are so many other books that could rightfully be banned but are not banned. And in fact, this Ashraf Ali Thanvi book was ultimately not banned.
Okay. Can I just...
Two last questions.
The secretary. That's it. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I'd like to ask all the panel members, if I may. It's quite interesting, some people have differences of understanding of we don't want Khalifa here, we don't want Khalifa system to come back. Fair enough. As Muslims, if this whole discussion is about Muslims living in the West and how to move forward, we believe in the laws of God. We believe in the morals and the guidance of God. So whatever Allah has revealed for us in the Quran and whatever has been explained in the Sunnah, then obviously these are the best guidance, these are the best laws. Take for example the laws for crimes and punishment. Obviously we as an individual Muslims, I as an individual Muslim, cannot go on the street and say, this person has committed theft, let me chop the hands off that person because I think this person is a thief. We have to think about what? We have to think about a system which can implement this law of God. When a crime happens, crime is committed, for example theft, or when a murder is committed, who's going to deal with this? Are we going to say, because we live in the West, we think the law of God is redundant, Allah's law, because the Quran cannot... My question is this: how do you as panel members see that you can implement the laws of Allah as He has revealed for us? For example, the laws to deal with murder, theft, the laws to deal with fornication and adultery. If you can just explain how you can deal with this law. Second, that's it.
Yes, I was only going to say that I agree with Abdullah and his definition of liberalism. There's a huge difference between liberalism and genuine freedom of speech. Modern liberalism is becoming extremely totalitarian, I would say, with more and more laws against hate speech and which track Muslims, just the same as non-believers.
Okay, thank you for that. Alright, so back on...
I'll be quick, so there's room for everyone else. This is a good point about implementing Hajj punishments. This is something that we're fixated on. Apparently we define Sharia by Hajj punishments. Of the four that are mentioned, of course the lashing for fornication, the classical sense is that it was abrogated by stoning. But I think the larger problem is the howness of implementing it. Yes, murder is obviously a sin, it's a crime in Sharia, but how do we prosecute these offenses? This is the issue, I think. For example, I would not want to be on the receiving end of any so-called Muslim country, and I call them so-called because they're really not. But the way that they have constructed themselves, you can imagine what kind of Islamic Sharia they will implement. It is not going to be with the benefits that we have in the West in terms of legal mechanisms. So the raising of doubt, there's one hadith, I'm not sure the authenticity of its exact citation, you can always shoot it down if you know it exactly, but stave off the head punishment by the raising of doubt. We know this as the legal test of reasonable doubt. So my wariness is with how the Muslims are going to prosecute these offenses. So for example, like you said, unfortunately you see a lot of Muslim youth who are very much on the Sharia mindset, they become the Qadi. Here's my takfir one, mushrik, kafir, munafiq. This what's happening is we've taken on this issue and all of a sudden we've become the Qadi. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any final point?
Yeah, just very, very briefly. There's a wonderful, interesting hadith which says, if a man says, the people are destroyed, he is the most destroyed amongst them. I.e., this is when Arabs say destroyed, or people are destroyed, this means like, the people are good for nothing, they'll never achieve anything, I don't trust them, they're all good for nothing, And this person, the person who complains about this, he's the worst of them. Now, I would say, Mubin, that maybe, let me finish, that the project to implement Sharia is not take into account whether the Muslims now are ready, or they won't do it, or they will do it, or they'll misimplement it. It's about getting the Muslims there, getting the Muslims ready to do it, getting the Muslims at the right mindset, the right place. Now you say, let's not even walk down this pathway because I don't trust Muslims. Well then, you are part of the problem and not part of the solution.
You're misrepresenting.
Okay. It's defeatism.
I think you made.
I'll let you finish misrepresenting my.
Okay, all right. But to answer that question about how do you implement the law, very simple. Okay, how does the West implement its laws? How does liberalism implement its laws? It's via an institution. What institution is it called? It's called a state. So that's very rational, makes sense, reasonable for liberalism to do that. But when we as Muslims say we want an institution as well that implements these laws, it's rational, it's reasonable, it's also mandated by the text. it's suddenly now, oh no, you can't, well, I don't like this state, I don't trust this state, or I don't, you can't do that. Say, no, you can do it, we can do it. We, the institution of the state is called the Khilaf, or the Caliphate, which is the successorship to the Prophet Muhammad who was managing that state, that institution. So this is the means, the method that which we implement the law, and in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that to each people, we've given them a sharia, a law, and a method, or a way to do this, to implement this. And this was the method that was given to us by the Prophet Muhammad. And my last point is that those people who believe that we can use democracy to get this system, as I said, in a liberal state, you can't vote out the current regime, you can't vote out liberalism. Likewise, in the Muslim world, in a secular state, you can't vote out secularism. But consider this. The Prophet Muhammad said, we do not give power to those who ask for it. And the Prophet Muhammad is a man of some authority, right? As for us Muslims. So, who are you going to give the authority to? Which person who's been asking you for it are you going to give it to? Ponder upon the Prophet Muhammad's hadith and the ramifications for participation in democracy.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much.
So many flaws.
On behalf of all the panelists, I'd like to give a big round of applause. We've learned a lot tonight.